Shri Suresh Prabhu.
Thank you, sir, for giving me this time. And I think the time will be enough to cover the 9 5-year plan 5 years. Sir, I am not going to paint a gloomy picture or a rosy picture because I am not an artist like the Planning Commission is. But I being not even a good appreciator of art, is going to just look at a painting as it is put before us. And sir, I am not very charmed but rather alarmed by the situation as is portrayed by this 9 5-year plan approach paper. Sir, we have been hearing for the last 6 years now, or rather little more than that, of new economic policy which has been ushered in our country. We are also thinking and talking about liberalization and globalizing our economy. And then, in that context, we are also vigorously following a process of planning. Sir, I would really like to know whether these two are compatible. What is the relevance of planning into this whole process in which we are asking all different types of forces to come, and the market will determine the roles of various institutions and what should be produced, what should be sold, the price at which it should be sold. And then what really brings us to this very question of the relevance of planning and in this modern thinking that the government has ushered us into. Sir, this relevance becomes more critical when we really appraise the last 5-year plan. The plan which incidentally coincides with this new economic policy that the previous government talked about. And sir, the attainments of this plan, I am very sorry to say, are really very deplorable. In fact, the attainments, nobody should really take any credit or should not be very happy about what has been really said in this 8 5-year plan. All targets which were specified in infrastructure, social sectors have really fallen short of expectations. The inflation has increased during the same period, and I think the inflation has also helped the Planning Commission to portray a better picture of attainment of targets in certain areas. Sir, the important issue that I think the Minister must really tell us is the relevance of planning and also the role of state into the whole new economic policy. So whether the state is going to play the role which it has played in the last 50 years in India, it is going to play a role of intervention, and if the state intervention is going to be there, what is the role of market and how the market forces and the role of state and this market, the state intervention is going to have, how is it going to work towards a common objective is something I think the government will like us to enlighten about. Sir, this is also an important year of planning in terms of after we signed the agreement with then GATT and now with World Trade Organization, we have really agreed on certain commitments to these multilateral agencies, to various other countries. One of the commitment pertains to reduction of customs, and probably if you are going to reduce custom duties over a period of time, then also reduce excise duties to keep our domestic industry alive. Of course, right now, we are reducing our custom duties faster than reducing our excise duties. It's a different question altogether. But suppose if we presume that we are going to reduce our custom duty to keep it at par with the commitments and also reduce excise duties to keep our domestic industry alive, from where are we going to raise these resources that we are talking about? So on one side is the international commitment given to WTO, and on the other side is this requirement of raising massive resources from the country to meet this new plan target of the 9 5-year plan. How are we going to work out these two things is something which I fail to understand. And I think the government must really enlighten us on this issue about how we are going to raise these massive resources, keeping in conformity with our commitment to WTO. There is hardly any reference to WTO in the 9 5-year plan, but I think the whole planning process has to be within the parameters of having agreed to do certain things within the next 5 years' time. Sir, this is the first year, the first budget which was presented to the Parliament, and we have just passed the finance bill under the first year of the 9 5-year plan. Sir, we probably get a feeling, though it is not mentioned in so many words, that a government is relying more on trickle-down effect. Rather than targeting a particular segment of society, now we feel that government must do certain things at macro level, and the trickle-down effect of that would be felt at grassroots level, and the poverty will be alleviated. There are so many things which are not properly in order, would be taken care of by the market forces itself, and the trickle-down effect itself will take care of it. But sir, I think this particular sort of a wishful thinking may not help us, though it has helped Margaret Thatcher. And now the follower of Margaret Thatcher had to lose elections after 5 years because the trickle-down effect has probably not helped the government also to reach the target that they were trying to reach. Sir, one of the other areas which I think we are all alarmed about is the government's fiscal management. So we are talking about raising resources of a magnitude of not less than 6 lakhs, together more than 2 lakh crores in this 5-year plan period, the investment that has to go into it, and of which 8.9% is going to come from the public sector itself. So public sector will have to put in about 6,63,000 crores investment into the plan. So this current year, our total interest obligation are 48% of the government's current income. About 1,45,000 crores is our debt servicing, when our total gross revenues are about 1,65,000 crores. So sir, we are already reaching a level in which there is hardly any amount which is left available for investment into other sectors, be it social sectors or even into infrastructure sectors. So however from we are going to find these massive resources that are necessary to go into this investment is something which we really must know. And that really brings us to a very alarming situation probably, that on one side the government has to reduce excise duties, government has to reduce the custom duties, and on the other side the investment that has to go into it is also increasing at a very fast rate. So the total debt burden on the country today is in excess of 6 lakh crores, and the interest that we have just committed to pay is 68,000 crores, and maybe in next 2 years time the interest liability would be far in excess of what it is now, because the rate at which the government is borrowing, as is mentioned by the planning document itself, is now increasing. The coupon rate of government bonds is now in excess of 13%. The old debt, which was raised at 5 and 6% about 15-16 years ago, is now retired at a very high rate of interest. And even if you presume that the level of debt is not going to increase significantly, the interest burden itself will increase because the government is borrowing at a very high rate. And that also brings us to a very serious feeling that whether all the investment that government is contemplating to put into the plan, whether it will be possible and the resources may be available with the government or not. Sir, one infrastructure area which is of great concern to the planners as well as to the government and probably for everybody is how are we going to make these investments into infrastructure. So the common minimum program is talking about $200 billion of investment, that is $200 billion of investment that is necessary. The planning, there was one document of planning which was prepared some years ago, it talks about $165 billion, and a Krishnamurthy committee report which you had appointed is estimating investment necessary into infrastructure even at a higher rate. But sir, take only one sector of it, the power. And a former power minister was sitting here, was telling me that this is one area which concerns him, and probably not only concerns him but concerns everybody else. Sir, according to Planning Commission, the investment, the new capacities that we have to create during next 5 years is to create 57,000 megawatt of power. Maybe a thumb rule of 4.5 crores per megawatt that may be necessary. The amount of money that will be required to just go into power itself will be so huge that probably we may not have money left for doing anything else if we decide only to create power, which may not be feasible again. Krishnamurthy committee report talks about 540,000 crores of rupees that are necessary to go into power. So are we really serious about what figures that were mentioned here, or we are just giving figures only for the sake of satisfying and creating a planned document? Are we going to really attain any of this, or this the magnanimity, sheer magnanimity of the magnitude of the figures itself is so mind-boggling that really one makes to feel whether it's an arithmetical exercise or a commitment to nation to create what has been really promised into this document. With the power that we need to create, how are we going to fund this? I know that there are so many independent power producers, IPPs, who have been invited to participate into this power program. One of the government's parameter for this is that not more than 40% of it can be financed by these financial institutions in the country. That leaves them to raise 60% of the money from other than loans from institutions. Are these producers capable of raising 60% of this money from India, from the capital markets? Are they capable of raising this money from overseas by the ECBs, the external commercial borrowings? And if the external commercial borrowings of this magnitude are going to take place, then what happens to the government's overall ceiling, which they have introduced? They have already put a cap on internal borrowings at global level, how much government can raise. So how we are going to raise this type of money, how these independent power producers going to be created, and how this funding is going to take place, which really one must know. And one point, I think the minister would really tell us at the end of his, when he is going to reply to the debate, is how are you going to create this power capacity is one aspect, and at what price you expect the consumers to pay for this power at the end of creation of all this capacity is something which we must know. Sir, according to some experts, it is feared that the price that a consumer may have to pay will be in excess of rupees 10 per unit. And this is because only 60% of the users of power really pay for it now. The growing tendencies of subsidizing power, of making it free for use of agriculture, for other uses, is really putting a burden on some users of power to pay that price. Also, because now we are going to use naphtha as a base for so many of our power projects, the import price of it and the declining value of rupee is going to make it more expensive for us to buy. So probably we may have to buy power, or the consumers may have to pay for power at a rate of rupees 10 per unit, which is really something which is very alarming. And I think the planning document must give some indication about at what price the power will be available to people, maybe from 4 or 5 years from now, or maybe after the end of the 9th 5-year plan. So one important thing of which a mention was made by my illustrious colleague, Mr. Jagmohan, is about the role of various institutions. So I am talking about institutions like legislature, executive and judiciary. But within the executives, the various institutions which are supposed to carry this delivery mechanism, the product, the service to be delivered to various beneficiaries, these institutions are crumbling. These institutions are becoming incapable of handling this huge task of rendering a quality service to the end users. How are you going to improve these institutions is something the planning document, I think, should have dwelt at, though it's not a real part of planning as such. But without that, if that thing becomes corroded, probably at the end of it, we may not get what we're really contemplating. Sir, one issue, and which I think is very sensitive one, which the minister may not like me to repeat again, is pertaining to this whole issue of collection of data and the validity of this data that we really rely upon. So there are independent institutions. Let us take a reputed institution like CMI. I'm sure you will definitely like to believe in what they have stated. The various data collecting agencies other than the government comes out with different statistics on the same issue. I am not going to repeat it again, but take figures of poverty. The methodology of ascertaining poverty can be different, but the very figures on which you rely cannot be different by 3 or 4 agencies. So for that, now we need to have an independent data collecting machinery which should have a status of that is enjoyed by something like Election Commission, and that data should be audited periodically by some agencies, and that I think will be in conformity with your policies of bringing in transparency into the functioning of the government. If you can really attain this, I think we would have attained a lot, because in that case our entire data collecting operations will be independent of the executive and will stand in, and then we can always rely on it, rather than saying that it is a politicalization of this issue is not desirable, and I am not raising it on political grounds, but trying to say that we must have an independent data collecting machinery and audit of it on a periodical basis by an independent agency.
Please.
Mr. Prabhu, it's a very important point. I also happen to be Minister of Statistics. We have a national sample survey its chairman carries the rank of a Minister of State. He is an independent expert. His name is Praveen Visaria. He is one of the country's best demographers, has a global reputation. We have an advisory committee on national accounts. Its former chairman was a man called Yogendar Alag when he was Vice Chancellor of the GNU. As soon as I became minister, I resigned. Its present chairman is Rakesh Mohan, who is the Director General of the National Council of Applied Economic Research. It consists of very distinguished people. So I would submit for your consideration that as far as data is concerned, we have had some difficulties, but we are trying our level best to overcome them. We keep some of the highest professional experts in charge. All our methodologies, Prabhu Sahab, are explicit, transparent, written up. I have got government to approve a policy that any information that you want will be available on either on computer file or whatever. First, of course, to Indian students, Indian universities, and then anywhere in the world, maybe to the outsiders at a slightly higher price, dollar denominated, and this thing. So in this matter, I want to be very clear. And also I want to make it very clear as Minister Planning that as long as I am there, we keep on publishing reports. When I was chairman of the Agricultural Crisis Commission, I published their reports. When I was chairman BICP, I published their reports. So transparency is a very important issue. I fully agree with the member. If there are any concrete suggestions, tell us. Differences can always be there. You see, take for example, this year's national income. There is a method of estimating national income which is clear and transparent. But an estimate made at the beginning of the year can vary. In fact, now we have joined an international monetary fund system for 23 countries. We are one of the selected countries in the world where quarterly estimates will be prepared. Now these things change all over the world, even in the United States. An estimate of this year's income in the first quarter will be different, second quarter will be different. So I would request the honorable members to bear with our very strong statistical agencies. They are professional people. I fully support them in their autonomy, and they are headed by transparent groups with very high authority. National Sample Survey, National Income Advisory Committee. But if there are any further concrete suggestions, I would always take them.
I think what the member meant was that apart from the government data collection agencies, which I'm sure you, as you say, are very, very capable people, do you also cross-check with any private data collection agencies to make sure that the variation will be there? But how much variation do you accept? 5%, 10%? What variation do you accept?
In all these, we have autonomous professional committees. That's what I mentioned. You see, the National Sample Survey, the chairman of the governing body was earlier V.N. Dandekkar. When I was director Sardar Patel Institute, I was a member. Had nothing to do with the government. Now it is Praveen Visaria, who's the director of the Institute of Economic Growth. The chairman of the National Income Advisory Committee to the government of the CSO is the Director General of the NCAR. He's a private sector person. So, you see, and it's not, of course, government statistical agencies also track these other things, but all our top level statistical agencies, A, have explicit transparent methodologies, B, are headed by professional advisory groups which are chaired by some of India's great statisticians. And this is a matter of fact. If beyond that there is something, one can always look into it.
The issue is, for example, take the urban poverty. The Lakdawala committee said it's 40% now urban poverty. And where the question is, planning commission should make up its mind what criteria is going to adopt, whereas your own says 18%, 40%, lot of different.
Honorable member is not fully informed on this. The planning commission has made up its mind. Please, sir.
So many years when we made noise that you change your...
No, sir. I can tell you that the planning commission took it very seriously and within the last 6 months we have taken a view on that, consulted expert bodies, tabled it on the floor of the House. They have been discussing these methods earlier. I don't want to get into that, but the plain fact of the matter is, Planning Commission has given you estimates by the new method.
Sir, tell me, when was the Lakdawala committee's report came to you?
Sir, may I submit for your consideration that Lakrawala was
He
very
wanted
close
to
to me. We worked in the same institute. He, in fact,
Give the direct answer, not the...
No, Buzz, I would not like to start a discussion on the side thing. I think the minister, I'd request the minister to, I would request the minister to reserve his comments for his final reply.
those I said.
Please reserve your comments for the
Factual
final.
clarification on
Mr. Prabhu,
Yes, sir.
please.
Sir, as a matter of fact,
आप अपनी पूरी
अच्छा,
बता रहे हैं,
please,
क्या थे क्या नहीं थे, लेकिन टू दी
कन्नौजिया साहब प्लीज बैठिए, आप प्रभु साहब का टाइम ले रहे हैं. Mr. Prabhu, please carry on because this is all being detracted from your time.
no, sorry, sir, please don't. Sir, actually, as a matter of fact, in fact, we have the same perception of the same issue. What I was saying was, we have the finest persons available in the country, and Dr. Alag is one of them, to do such a job. And in fact, they are doing a good job. What I am saying is, there has to be an independent data collecting machinery, independent of the executive. They should have something like a status of an election commission. We should work independently to do data collection. We should be audited also separately, so that there will be more reliance on this information that they collect. In fact, there is no question, may not be any political motivations in giving data like this, but to make sure that we also remain. Now, when we are globalizing, why not have global standards into this is something which I wanted to say. Sir, one just small information, I think I should like to get it from the minister as just a point of information. So there have been some times in the past, for some reasons or other, there was no planning in that particular period. The 5-year plans had to be deferred. The implementation of the plans had to be deferred for several reasons. Sir, as a point of information which you mentioned that for some period there was no plan as such. Did we grow during that period or not? And if we did really grow during the period when there was no planning in India as such, and at what rate did we grow? Is something which I would just like to have as a point of information for us to really know the relevance of this planning into this period. And I think I would really like to have this. Sir, the important point is about the cooperatives and the NGOs. Sir, we have always have a chapter on the cooperatives as a mechanism to bring about change. The 8th 5-year plan, unfortunately, was the only exception. The 8th plan never even mentioned about cooperative institutions, and it forgot about the existence of it. We have been demanding, and all those who believe in cooperative federalism, I think this is the best federal institutions available in the country, in which the members participate in the development of it directly. Are we really thinking, because there is no mention for it unfortunately in this plan document period, are we really thinking about involving this large segment of cooperatives into this process of planning and development is something which I would like to know. And also, our first plan document which was prepared, and late Jawaharlal Nehru laid great stress on NGOs. He happened to be the president. I think he chose to be a president of Bharat Sevak Samaj, and he created an institution to promote NGO culture in the country, and he said that NGOs could bring about a lot of development. Have we forgotten about NGOs now, or are we going to give them the due share in this planning? And this process of planning is something which I think we'll have to really know. And one aspect about this geographical development, certain regional imbalances that exist in a country. We have talked about it, we have talked about Northeast, but are we going to take a little different view than what is stated in the plan document? Sir, there may be states
I would request you to now think of winding up.
Yes, sir. I am already started thinking, sir. Sir, are we thinking about having a different approach to these imbalances? Because there are developed states. Now, if you go by planning commission's figures, Maharashtra happens to be a developed state. But there are certain districts and there are certain tehsils in this state which are more backward than probably some tehsils in Bihar. There are certain states at state level, they may be developed. But are we thinking of taking an approach of taking tehsil or a district as a unit and determine the backwardness and have a different norms to remove this backwardness in next 5 or 10 years period during the 9th and the 10th 5-year plan? Then and then alone we will be able to really bring about a sea change into the lives of these people who live maybe in a worse poverty than even in otherwise called backward states. Are we prepared to take an approach like this? I think and I strongly demand that government must have an approach to planning keeping tehsil as a unit or maybe a district as a unit rather than taking unit of state as a whole. The social sector investment, which we are really talking about and we take a tremendous credit for it, have incidentally gone down. In last 5-year period, our investments into social sectors have gone down. The medical and health, public health, wanted to put in the 7th plan 1.69 and 8th plan is 1.62. In fact, lower than the previous plan. So during the 8th 5-year plan, during the time when we globalized ourselves, during the time when we wanted to change lives of people, the health and social sectors have received less amount than the previous 5-year plan. The regime that we wanted to change by bringing about a new economic policy. But this has also happened. So social sectors must receive a due share. And a point I wanted to raise during the finance bill and also on the budget is, sir, a very important point, I feel. Sir, we are going to raise now resources. And resources are going to be eaten away by interest and principal for prepayment of loan. And social sectors are also crying for tremendous attention. So are we thinking of raising separate resources earmarked for applying only on social sectors? Can there be a tax only for raising, or can you put up a tax to be used, the collection of which to be used only for using on social sectors? And I think if you don't do that, if you don't have a specific earmarked collection of taxes and revenue, we may not be able to target the social sectors as we should do. And I think that is what we have to do in the times to come. And the level and the point of which there is no mention, unfortunately, is how are we going to reduce the cost of administration in the times to come. The looming danger of 5th 5 pay commission, the demand of creation of new states, the smaller states which are really necessary. But how are we going to reduce the cost of administration at the central level, at the state level, and even at the Panchayat Raj level is something which the plan document should have addressed itself to. And I think this is a very important issue. Unless we will talk about it, we will not be able to solve many other important issues.
Okay,
and
please wind up now.
Yes, sir. And sir, in these 50th years of independence, because I have to wind up, and I cannot unfortunately still forget that I had a training as a chartered accountant. Can I request the Honorable Minister as well as the government as a whole to give us a balance sheet of our country's attainment in last 50 years? So can we make a balance sheet of our country? Can we find out on one side what are really the physical assets, and can we give value to those assets? In fact, Dr. Raja Chelia, when he happened to be the advisor to the Economic Finance Ministry, I had a discussion with him on this issue. I had asked him, does government prepare a balance sheet? Because we want the transparent system of government accounting. Can we think about it? And can we really then analyze that what we have gained, what are the total liabilities, what are the total assets of the government? And this balance sheet itself should be a starting point for introducing a planning, maybe for the 10th 5-year plan. And then alone, we'll be able to evaluate one balance sheet against the other balance sheet of the 5-year period. And then we'll be able to find out the attainments of it. And one issue that government shies away from talking about it, because I understand their predicament. We want an investment to come into agriculture in a big way. At the same time, there are friends who want agriculture reforms in which the land now held by many should be, by few, should be held in the hands of many. At the same time, to bring about better investment into agriculture, we are also want corporatization of agriculture. The corporatization itself will presuppose that not only fragmentation of land, but probably consolidation of the existing land and consolidating in the hands of one corporate from many.
Please wind up now. Please, Mr. Prabhu,
how are you going to reconcile to this demand of agriculture reforms on one side, land reforms on one side, and on the other side, the need to put in more corporatization as a part of agriculture process to bring about better investment? And I think this is something which, again, you must be able to tell us. And sir, I always feel that there cannot be any models for development. Every country has to find out its own model, and India also has to find its own model. But if at all,
okay, Mr. Prabhu, please wind up now.
Yeah, we have to have a model. I think we must have China, and I think we should be able to compare some social parameters of China with India, and then we'll know, because the population size is probably bigger than India, but the social sector development that is done is much better than what we attain, and I think that we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.